Shalom, welcome to our Friday talk on Patreon. Welcome to all our members, and we appreciate you being there, and we hope that your week is winding down to a holy Shabbat. Here in Eretz Israel, unfortunately, we've had another attack on a pair of three beautiful innocent Jews at a spring in the Binyamin Hills. So I'd like this Shira to be for their recovery complete. We don't have any names yet, but it was a drive-by with an explosive device. So all our prayers and kavanah should be for their full recovery. And it's hard to lift ourselves to the joy of the coming Shabbat when people are suffering as they are. And this is a challenge that we face every day as Jews, certainly in Eretz Israel, and certainly in Chutz La'aretz, outside the land also. There are continuous reasons to be concerned and to feel the tsar of other people is part of our job. Now, not everybody can feel what others feel, and King Solomon said, Mosif mach'ov, Mosif dat, Mosif mach'ov. The general interpretation of that pasuk from King Solomon, who was the wisest of all men, is that the more you know, the more you suffer. It kind of makes sense, If you know things about other people, you know where they are suffering, and you feel a bit of that yourself. And if you know about God, then you must even know more about suffering, because who suffers more than who experiences more pain than the Creator, who is absorbing all the pain of this world through the divine presence, the Shira, who is in exile, and that's what she collects out there in exile, is the crying out of the Jewish people. And a lot of us cry and don't even know it. A lot of us, we don't know it because our souls are asleep, but the pain is still there. I remember years ago that I felt emptiness in certain situations in life, and I just didn't know why. Why do I feel empty when I wake up Sunday morning? Why do I feel empty when I come home from work? Why do I feel empty on Friday night when the whole world is going out to party? And, it took a few years to figure it out with the help of the Torah, though I instantly understood. The emptiness was actually God calling to me. God creates a vacuum in your heart and says, come. Feel your emptiness in order to know there's something else. Now, if I hadn't felt those moments of emptiness, I would have gone on thinking, well, this is just the way life is. You feel empty, and you feel the emptiness day by day, and it always seems to go back to being empty. And you fill it with this type of pleasure or that type of pleasure, and it just didn't seem fair to constantly be refilling the same emptiness. So you do some psychology, and you get some therapy, and you find out that the emptiness is based on other things. Things like trauma, things like anger, things like sins that cause disconnection. Those sins are usually the realm of religion, not psychology. And that's, of course, a falsehood. At least when it comes to Torah, because Torah is much more than a religion. Torah is the structure of man and the structure of the universe. So that emptiness was really God calling me to Him, and I invite all of you to experience it that way and see it that way. Rabbi Nachman calls it the voice of the Torah, calling each person every day, come to me, come to the Torah, come to the mitzvot. And the greatest of all mitzvot, of course, is Shabbat. The mitzvah Shabbat is the only one that God calls matana beit ginzai, a gift that I've hidden in my treasure house. So the Torah is a gift. It is not a given. It is not something that is just understood by itself. Otherwise, all the world would be having a day off every week. Now, a lot of the world does because of Christianity and Islam. And I imagine a few other people take off a day a week or more because they can. You know, they have the bank account to do it. But really, a lot of the world just works and doesn't stop working until they can't. And so you see, the gift of the Shabbat is that God says, no, you have to stop. To understand me, you have to stop. To have a relationship with me, you have to stop working. Because this world is not all work. This world is work, and then experience the pleasure of the Creator. And how you experience the pleasure, well, that depends on what you like and your makeup and your spiritual structure, if you will. But every Saturday night, that gift of Shabbat goes away, more or less. And so it's a gift that keeps hiding. This Shabbat, it comes down now on Friday afternoon, and we're suddenly, that great sigh of relief from another week. That great hope of something more than this world, something more than those moments of emptiness, something more than those coming home from work and get up and do it again. And Shabbat provides a little bit of the something more. A taste. A moment. Hopefully 25 hours worth of moments. And then, Motzi Shabbat, the gift goes into hiding again. Now, the Zohar and the Arizal explain to us that when we received the Torah at Mount Sinai, we were given two crowns. The crown of the Torah and the crown of Shabbat. And when the golden calf was made, and make it very clear in your heart, very few Jews actually serve that golden calf. But God was very upset with us for not fighting back and destroying the party before it happened. Now that's a level of zealousness like Pinchas to do what he did, to take out Zimri and Cosby because they were behaving improperly in public. But to take out the wrath of God upon the people who made the golden calf, that fell upon Moses because we didn't stop it. And because we didn't stop it, God took away the crown of Shabbat. And all those sparks of light, those holy moments that illuminate your eyes and your heart on Shabbat, were taken away and given to the soul of Moses, the general's collective soul of humanity, and the Shekhinah, the divine presence. And then God said, okay, now I'll give you back a moment that you had before the golden calf every Shabbat. And then you'll give it back again. And so this Shabbat is this gift that God keeps taking back. I mean, I don't know if we want to. I don't think it probably wouldn't be appropriate to call God an Indian giver, because maybe it's not PC. Maybe the Indians aren't like that either. I don't know. It's such an old phrase. But I grew up in Florida, and we actually had a lot of respect for the Indians because of what they went through. Anyways, God gives us the Shabbat, and then he takes it back and says, now, do it again. Work another 6 days, and I'll give you your Shabbat back. And I'll give you that crown of perception. It's a crown of consciousness that you're given on Shabbat, and it grows through the day into Saturday night, into Motzi Shabbat. And it's designed to do that. It's a developmental process, because you get your nefesh of Shabbat, the sanctifying of your body on the Knesset Shabbat. When Shabbat comes in, we get the nefesh of the upper soul. Right? And then we get the ruach when we say Baruch Hu on Arvit of Mariv of Erev of Friday night davening. And then we get the neshama of the Shabbat night when we daven the Amida of Friday night. Okay, and then the same triplicate process takes place on Shabbos morning and Shabbos day. Between Shachris, we receive a new, holier nefesh, and so on, all the way up to Mincha of Shabbat. We receive the Keter, the peak of the union between the two aspects of the divine, the male and the female. So this process is played out every week. And the Kabbalah makes great efforts to describe it to us over and over. Learning the books primes your mind to receive the light, but you don't have to learn the books to receive the light. You just have to keep Shabbat with joy. So, not everybody can learn those books, but everybody can keep Shabbat with joy. All things being equal, you know. There are plenty of reasons not to feel joy in the world. But somehow when you feel the joy, the reasons diminish their power over us. So when we think about our fellow Jews being attacked and blown up and knifed and all these horrible things, how do you approach it? How do you process it? I don't really want to feel the pain, but I do. And some people, they're not even going to go there. And it really depends on every person's individual vessel, what they're capable of experiencing. But we need to understand something extremely deep and important about the experience of pain. God is not a mean God. God is not vengeful to us. God is vengeful to our enemies because they're out of hand. And God is not punishing in the way that we understand the idea of punishment. But He created a system that humanity partakes in the processing of the energy of this world. He created such a perfect system that humanity does good and releases good into the entire universe. And if humanity does not good, then the opposite occurs. We release not good into the universe. We are the faucet where goodness and evil enter the system. Each person at their own, the diameter of your plumbing. Okay? Now, that's what it means to be Etzelem Elokim. That's what it means to be made in God's image. So if you don't like this equation, which, a lot of people wouldn't really like to know this level of responsibility. What, are you kidding? Every time I do something bad, it's causing evil in the world? I can't handle that. Well, that's because you can't measure it. And then there are people who go the opposite extreme. They take on all the responsibility of the world because of their grandiosity and their ego complexes. They say, I closed the door on somebody and now a building exploded. I met people like this. Every move they interpret as being the end of the world. So you see how important I am? So that grandiosity complex is very dangerous too. And it's the opposite inverse extreme of the saying, well, nothing I do really matters, nothing I really do has impact. That's also not true. Each person has impact and each person has responsibility according to who they are and what they're supposed to do and what they're here to do. So when we talk about feeling pain, as people are feeling right now, all over Israel, because of all the horrible things that happen, we have to understand that our feeling the pain is God's release valve. It is the Shekhinah's way of releasing the negative energy. Rabbi Nachman teaches us very clearly that it is God's glory and honor to you that you can feel the pain. That He's telling you, showing you what the Shekhinah is going through. And if the Shekhinah is suffering and you decide to try to accept some of that pain, you're actually diminishing the level of negativity in the world, in the whole universe, and by the divine presence. And as Rabbi Nachman says, is there any greater honor than that the king shows you his pain? Now, most people, when you walk into the king's palace, he's sitting on the throne, he's got ministers everywhere, he's got his golden scepter, he's got his crown, maybe he's wearing of some very special clothing. He's not showing you any pain. If you're lucky, he'll smile. Most kings. The king doesn't have to show you anything. And most of the people that come in before the king, they have their requests, they make their pleas, they argue their arguments, and the king considers and answers and files them for when he wants to deal with it, because he's the king. But the king doesn't show you what's going on behind the scenes. The king doesn't tell you how the queen is doing. The king doesn't tell you the suffering of the queen for her children, like every mother suffers for her children, and some fathers. But they don't show you that. The king says, okay, thank you for coming. I will try to help you. And you leave the palace and you go back to your life. But can you imagine if the king pulls you aside and says, I want you to stay here with me. And when the session is over and they close the royal palace, God lets you stay inside. And he says, he invites you into the royal quarters. And he says, I want to show you my queen. You think it's so great to be king? When everybody's Mel Brooks, it's great to be queen or king. There's some confusion about that these days. And the king shows you the suffering of his prince, of the princess and of the queen. Is there any greater honor than that? That God gives you an intimate connection? Isn't that better than Mordechai riding around on the horse? In the king's clothing, with the king's scepter, with the king's crown, and Haman gets to pull him along. That's an honor to walk around Shushan, the capital city of Bira, with hundreds of thousands of people, many of them rabid anti-Semites. And suddenly the Jew gets to ride around town being pulled by the chief minister. That's an honor. But who created that honor? Do you remember the story on Purim? Haman created the honor. Haman wanted to be the guy on the horse. Haman wanted to wear the throne, the crown and the robes and the scepter, the whole story. And Achashverosh turned it around on him. It was a man-made honor. But a God-made honor, that's the honor that counts, that changes reality. And the God-made honor is when the king shows you what's happening really behind the scenes. Like the suffering of the Shekhinah in exile. And that, my friends, is what it really means to experience the pain of the Jewish people. So each person at his level, each person at his capacity. But you should know that when you're suffering, your suffering is not just yours. It is the portion that God has sent you in order for you to get closer, to enter into a more intimate relationship with Him. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to go out and run around looking for pain. No. But it does mean when it comes, I'm going to deal with it as best I can and learn from it and move on. There's a lot of pain out there. As a therapist, you see more than most people, I think. Rabbis experience a lot of pain too, because everybody goes and tells them their stories of woe. So each person at their level. But Shabbat comes along and says, okay, we're stopping the pain right now, Friday afternoon. It's time to celebrate another week of creation. Another week of hard work to reveal God's presence in a world that's fighting us. But now we're going to do the most ultimate thing we can do to reveal God's presence, and that's nothing except celebrate and pray and meditate and sing and dance and make blessings. That's how we show the world. And that's how we have to show ourselves. That all this suffering that you hear on Facebook and on the news and everywhere else, and in your own life, it's all ephemeral, it's changing, it's moving, it's on its way out the door. And the great Shabbat is on its way. And Moshe Rabbeinu is in the celestial palace handing out crowns that we once wore. And we're getting back a little bit each week. Now, if we don't keep Shabbat, or let's say you have Shabbat in your heart and your mind, like a lot of Jews say, well, I have it in my heart. I still go to the club on, Saturday morning. I still play golf. I still do whatever I do. But in my heart, I have Shabbat. Well, that's something. That is something. It's a beginning. I wouldn't call it an end. But each person in his place. We can't judge anybody. We can barely judge ourselves. But when we understand that our pain is really God's pain in partnership with humanity in order to process the negativity out of the system, because He's going to bring in new positivity all the time. And that's another big thing that we learn about in Kabbalah, is about this union and reunion of the worlds always bringing down new life force. And that new life force takes the place, it becomes desire, it becomes joy, it becomes whatever positive vessel that you have. So this Shabbat, let's remember that even when things hurt us, it's not really a punishment. It's something to get through, to help us grow and get closer and more intimate with the King. And if it becomes too much, well, pick up your phone, call someone that cares about you. If it becomes too much, pick up a Tehillim, start praying. Because whatever you can do to process the pain is going to help. But just not wanting it doesn't really help. That's like telling God, no, God, I can't help you here. I'm sorry, God, I can't feel the Shekhinah's pain right now. I've got my own business to deal with. That doesn't work. And Shabbat is really a time that you see that all the pain that I felt during the week is still external. And all the worry and doubt, it's not going to be here too long. It's moving on. And the light of Shabbat will always come back. And when it hides again, you'll remember, I know you, Shabbat, you're coming back. And on Sunday, I'll buy something for Shabbat. And on Monday, I'll buy something for Shabbat. And every day, I'm going to remember Shabbat, God willing. And next thing you know, your whole week is like a preparation for Shabbat. And life gets even more special. Okay, so have a great Shabbat and let the holiness enter you, permeate you. Don't fight it. Don't resist it. Because really, we just have to accept, receive. And sometimes receiving is the hardest thing to do. We'll talk more about that another time here on our Patreon classes. And we'll see you next week. Next week we'll have a question and answer. Again, for Rosh Chodesh Elul. It's a big day, Rosh Chodesh Elul. The beginning of the countdown to the creation of the world, to the birthday of Adam and Eve and our forefathers. So we'll have more to say about that. And we're publishing new stuff all the time. So look forward to being with you. All the best.